If you spend enough time in Thailand, long enough for the holiday tan to fade and the initial magic to wear off, you eventually start noticing a group of people that almost nobody talks about. They aren't the ones you see on the social media feeds. They aren't the digital nomads tapping away on shiny MacBooks at beachside cafes. The slick businessmen closing deals in Bangkok skyscrapers, or the retirees posting updates about living in paradise. They aren't the success stories. In fact, most people look right through them, yet they are everywhere. If you know where to look, you see them sitting entirely alone in small neon-lit beer bars at 2 in the afternoon, staring blankly at a muted television screen. You see them nursing a single lukewarm Chang beer in the corner of a local coffee shop, looking out at the traffic for hours without pulling out a phone. They are the guys renting cheap concrete rooms above dusty mechanic shops, or living quietly in crumbling apartment blocks that will never grace the thumbnail of a travel vlog. These are the invisible men of Thailand. So today, I want to talk about them because I believe their quiet existence tells us something profoundly important about human nature, about the nature of failure, and about the dangerous illusions we sell ourselves when we pack up our lives and move across the world. The internet has manufactured a deeply distorted picture of what it means to live in Southeast Asia. If you view this country strictly through the lens of algorithms or Instagram filters, you'd easily believe that crossing the border into Thailand is an automatic cure for misery. The digital narrative is relentless. Luxury high-rise condos, pristine white sand beaches, endless motorbike adventures, and effortless romance. The underlying message is always the same. The West is broken. Escape your boring life. Come here, press reset, and finally live your dream. And for some people, that dream does materialize. But for a massive silent minority, the reality that waits for them at the end of that flight is something entirely different. What the glossy travel channels completely fail to realise is that Thailand acts as a massive psychological magnet for men at absolute turning points in their lives. People rarely uproot their entire existence when things are going perfectly at home. They come here because something broke. They arrive at Bangkok airport right after a devastating, asset-stripping divorce. They arrive after being made redundant from a career they spent 30 years building. They come after a business went bankrupt, or because the suffocating loneliness of a grey western winter finally became too heavy to bear. For many, Thailand isn't just a destination, it's an escape hatch. But let's talk straight. There is absolutely no shame in wanting a fresh start. The human drive to reinvent yourself when life knocks you down is admirable. But here is the hard truth that a lot of men learn way too late. A change in geography does not equal a change in character. A lot of guys operate under the massive delusion that their geographic location is the root cause of all their misery. They look at their bleak town, their stressful job, and their empty apartment, and they think, if I can just get out of this place, everything will fix itself. But unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. You can change your passport stamps overnight, but you cannot change your internal programming that quickly. So when you step off the plane into the humid Bangkok air, you don't magically leave your demons in the overhead locker. The men who arrive carrying heavy emotional baggage, whether that's deep-seated depression, chronic isolation, an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, terrible financial discipline, or a total lack of personal purpose, they soon discover that those problems followed them right onto the baggage carousel. In fact, far from curing these issues. Thailand has a strange way of acting as an amplifier for them. Back home, the rigid structures of society, the cold weather, the high cost of living, the judgment of family, the necessity of turning up to a job force you to keep your guard up. They act as an external scaffolding that keeps you functioning. But when you remove all of that structure, when you find yourself in a tropical climate where life is easy, cheap, and entirely unstructured, those hidden fractures in your character don't heal, they widen. There is a dangerous, outdated misconception that Thailand is an incredibly cheap country where you can live like a king on pocket change. Today, the financial landscape is completely different. Many men arrive in Thailand with what looks like a healthy nest egg. Maybe they sold a property back home, walked away with a corporate severance package, or managed to stack a significant amount of investments. They look at the price of a local meal or a monthly condo rental and they calculate that they have enough capital to coast for decades. But capital has a habit of bleeding out when you are not paying attention. It rarely happens overnight in one dramatic catastrophe. It's a slow, agonizing process. It starts with the honeymoon phase. When you first arrive, every day feels like a holiday. You're eating out every meal, buying rounds at the bar, enjoying the vibrant nightlife, and feeling a level of social status you never experienced back in your hometown. But then come the mistakes. Maybe it's a business venture entered into with a local partner because a foreigner legally cannot own land. They pour their life savings into a commercial dream they don't fully understand. When the business inevitably fails, the money is gone. Or maybe it's a failed relationship where emotional generosity blurred the lines of financial sanity. A rented house here, a piece of land bought in someone else's name there, a constant stream of financial support sent to a rural province. And then, of course, there is the nightlife. Alcohol in Thailand is cheap, but when every night is a party, the math changes. The bar tabs stack up. The financial discipline required to manage a fixed budget over 20 years simply dissolves in the heat. Months quietly bleed into years. The savings balance drops from 6 figures to 5 to 4. The exchange rates fluctuate against them. Inflation creeps up. And suddenly a man who once walked through the airport feeling completely bulletproof finds himself sitting in a cheap room, desperately counting every single baht, realizing he is entirely trapped. The most terrifying aspect of this financial and psychological decline isn't the lack of money itself, it's the silence that accompanies it, and that silence is driven by one incredibly powerful, destructive thing: male pride. Societally, men are conditioned from birth to believe their entire value is tied to their utility. We are told we need to be the providers, the protectors, the strong, independent anchors. We are taught that asking for help is a sign of weakness, and admitting absolute failure is the ultimate humiliation. This psychological programming becomes a prison for the struggling expat. When things start going wrong in a foreign country, the rational move would be to put your hands up, call your family or friends back home, admit you made a massive miscalculation, and ask for help. But for these men, that phone call feels worse than death. Imagine having to call your adult children, your siblings, or your old colleagues, the very people you left behind while chasing a tropical paradise, and admitting that you blew it. Imagine explaining that the dream life you bragged about has collapsed. The sheer humiliation of that vulnerability is unbearable. So instead of reaching out, they withdraw. They stop posting on social media. They stop answering phone calls from old friends back home. They build a wall of absolute silence around themselves to protect whatever microscopic shred of dignity they have left. They convince themselves that they just need a little more time, but while they wait, they become ghosts in their own lives. They become completely invisible. Now, this isolation is amplified by the unique environment of long-term expat life. To the outside observer, the idea of being lonely in Thailand sounds completely absurd, but true loneliness has nothing to do with physical proximity to other humans. It is the total absence of deep, meaningful connection. A man can sit in a packed, roaring sports bar surrounded by hundreds of people drinking and shouting, but still feel completely and utterly isolated from the world. The social ecosystem for many long-term expats can be incredibly superficial. You can have dozens of acquaintances, people you exchange nods with at the local pub, bartenders who know your drink order, but absolutely nobody who actually knows you. Nobody knows your history. Nobody knows the regrets that keep you awake at 3 in the morning, or the genuine fear you feel when you look at your diminishing bank account. The conversations stay on the surface. When you live in a culture where you don't fully speak the language and where you will always fundamentally be viewed as an outsider, a farang, the psychological weight of that permanent foreignness starts to take a toll. You are in the crowd, but you are never part of it. And when that level of isolation settles into a man's bones, he almost always looks for a coping mechanism to dull the ache. Now, we need to be very precise and careful here. Most people who enjoy a few cold beers after a hot day are not alcoholics. But it would be completely dishonest to talk about the invisible men of Thailand without addressing the massive elephant in the room: alcohol. In the West, heavy drinking is usually restricted by societal friction. If you start drinking at noon on a Tuesday in a cold, rainy town, people judge you. It's expensive, it's noticeable, and it directly interferes with your survival. But in Thailand's entertainment zones, the guardrails are completely gone. The bars open early, the music is always playing, and nobody is judging you for having a drink at breakfast. In fact, the entire environment is designed to encourage it. For a man who is struggling with loneliness, financial stress, or a total loss of life purpose, alcohol quickly stops being a social lubricant and transforms into a quiet, reliable companion. It becomes a form of self-medication that is completely socially acceptable within that specific expat bubble. When you're sitting in that bar at 2 in the afternoon, the first 2 drinks do exactly what you need them to do. They quiet the anxiety, they make the regrets feel less sharp. The financial worries recede into the background, and the intense isolation feel completely tolerable. So, for a few brief hours, you aren't a failing expat trapped in a foreign country. You're just a guy having a good time. Now, the tragedy, of course, is that the alcohol wears off, but the reality never changes. Tomorrow will always arrive right on schedule, and it brings the exact same set of problems back with it. Except now, those problems come with less money in your pocket and an even deeper sense of shame. It's a vicious, circular trap that is incredibly difficult to break out of once the routine sets in. Now, none of the invisible men ever expected to end up here. Nobody buys a one-way ticket to Bangkok, packs up their life and steps off the plane imagining that 10 years later they'll be an isolated, financially broken ghost drifting through the shadows of a tropical city. They arrived with the exact same optimism, the exact same excitement, and the exact same big dreams as the guys making the successful YouTube vlogs. Life just simply unfolded differently than they planned. And perhaps that is exactly why their story matters so much, because this isn't actually a cautionary tale about Thailand. This is a story about the fragile nature of being human. Every single one of us, no matter how smart, secure, or successful we think we are, carries the distinct possibility of failure. Every one of us has psychological blind spots, makes massive miscalculations, and is capable of drifting off course. The only difference is that when you make those mistakes thousands of miles away from your native support system, the safety net is gone and the fall is a lot harder. Now, I want to close on a point that almost everyone misses, because social media completely ruins our ability to see nuance. The internet only deals in extreme dramatic endings. You are either a massive roaring success story or a total tragic failure. But real life happens entirely in the grey space in between. Not every invisible man you see sitting alone is defeated. Some of them are in the middle of a quiet, brutal process of rebuilding their lives from scratch. Some of them are recovering from their mistakes, drying out, sorting their finances, and processing their grief away from the prying eyes of the people who knew them before. Failure isn't a permanent destination. Most of the time, it's just the middle of the book. So sometimes, that older guy sitting by himself in a local cafe isn't lost. He's reflecting. He's planning his next move. He's healing. What looks like stagnation from the outside can actually be a profound transformation happening in absolute slow motion. Nobody films the long, incredibly boring, unglamorous process of a human being putting his life back together, because it doesn't get clicks. But that quiet, unapplauded space is exactly where real resilience is born. So the next time you are travelling or living in Thailand and you see a foreigner sitting entirely by himself in the quiet corner of a local spot, resist the urge to immediately assume you know his story. Don't judge him and don't pity him either. He might have lost everything he owned. He might be in the middle of rebuilding a completely new life. He might be fighting a terrifying invisible battle that you can't possibly comprehend. Or he might be more at peace than he has ever been in his entire life. Because the most important, profound stories in this country are never the loudest ones. They aren't the ones shouted from the rooftops of luxury condos or broadcasted through social media algorithms. They are the quiet ones, the raw ones, the invisible ones, and those are the stories that genuinely deserve to be told.